Hey guys, so this is going to be my third lesson in needle felting, and today's lesson is going to be about using stencils in your needle felting work. Now, what I mean by stencils is essentially like you use something that has a shape to it. So in some tutorials about needle felting, you may have seen people use cookie cutters. So this is a similar concept in that you can make your own cookie cutter, in that you make a basic shape. And with these, I just made them out of index cards. So here are just some shapes. Here's a little triangle, smaller circle, a small circle, and here is a funnel shaped one that is perfect for making like wings, three-dimensional wings, or a cap, like a Christmas cap hat, and just some more various sizes of circles. So I didn't get this idea on my own. The first time I've seen it was in Macaroon's needle felting tutorial for beginners. She had gotten it out of this needle felting tutorial book, or like this book that teaches you how to start needle felting, and hers was actually the published book. Mine, I got this off of Etsy from a PDF file. So I can't read Japanese, but it's by let me just zoom. So it's by Chiku Chiku. I guess that's the author or creator's name. I've Google searched it, and there's multiple books by this creator. So this book in particular shows you a lot of how to go about needle felting these little characters. And if you're wondering why it's black and white, it's because I downloaded it off the PDF that I bought off of Etsy, and it was only a few dollars for the PDF file. And for the book itself, it would have been more convenient for me to just take it to my local print shop and to go ahead and print that out. And I binded it, and altogether it cost about like for the PDF file and for printing everything out, it was about $20. It came to $20, so it was about the same price as the actual book itself. I think on Handcrafter's Etsy website, they have the actual book, so it's $20, not including shipping. But this itself, though, is actually the book that I printed. There's actually like two PDFs in here, two books in particular, and I'm just going to reference out of Chiku Chiku's book first, because out of all the PDF files that I've downloaded off of Etsy, purchasing these how-to on needle felting, this one in particular was the most helpful. It taught me how to use basic shapes. So here you go. This page in particular, you've probably seen it in Macaroon's video that I'm referencing from. It says to use a clear file or some sort of plastic, flexible plastic that you could cut into these shapes, like this kind of rectangle, or this fan shape. You put the clear file on, you trace it, and you cut it, and then you fold it or curl it into the shape that I had. Well, I don't have any clear files or anything that was handy at home, so what I used instead was I used an index card, or cardstock would work as probably as well. So I didn't trace it, I just needed just some sort of basic shape. So what I did was just an index card, I curled it, and you can curl it for however big, wide, or small that you want it to. So you just do that, tape it, and there you go. Same way with the smaller circles. I might just cut this in half and roll it so that way I have a circle. Now, with that in mind, I would recommend putting tape. So before you roll the index card, line it with tape. So that way when you're needle felting with your needle and you're pressing or putting wool into, let's say you're putting wool into the funnel here, and you're using your needle and needle felting inside, because it's a jagged edge off of the needle, it has a tendency to shred the inside of the paper if you do not tape it. So inside, before I rolled it, I lined it with tape, so that way it's slick and it won't shred the paper. Otherwise, once you put wool in and you start needle felting it in and the paper starts to shred, those pieces of pieces of shredded paper will cling onto the wool, and it just creates a very messy clump of wool. So that is that. So let me just go ahead. So now you know to go, you can use any kind of stiff paper. Like I said, index cards or cardstock would work. And the most common shapes that I use is the triangle, the circles, particularly these two, because most of my needle felting crafts are very small. And this funnel here, whenever I'm using the, or should I say cone, I use this whenever I make hats or wings off of birds. So if you watched my previous tutorial on how to make that chick donut, I used this cone shape thing, and I had used it to make the wings of the chick. So you can look at that video if you would like to know how to go about doing that. So these are the shapes that I use the most, and for this one I am going to make just like a basic bear head. So I'm just going to make the ears, and I'm going to use it with this. And the nice thing with the paper, you can customize it which way you want, in whatever sizes you want. So as you've seen before, I made various sizes when I needed to. So let me go ahead and show you how this works. Now, since I'm making bear ears, I need to make sure that the wool that I take out will be the same amount for each ear. Otherwise, if I pull out, let's say I pull out wool and I'm going to make one ear. Now, the problem with that when you do one ear at a time is you may have a tendency that one might have more wool than the other. So what I do, and this is also true with when you're making limbs, so arms or anything like that, you want the arms to be of equal distribution. You want them to be of the same thickness and of the same length. So what I do, instead of just making one at a time, I pull out the amount of wool that I think is adequate for whatever I'm making, and the only way you know about how much wool you need is just by trial and error. But in terms of just equal distribution, just make sure that you have a small clump and you just evenly split it apart. So that way you have roughly the same amount of wool for each ear or for each arm. So now, and you also want to use both hands just to see if it's about the same amount of wool. So this feels about the same amount of wool, though I think I can already tell that maybe this one might have a little bit more wool than that one because there's still some parts on the ends. But that isn't too bad, just so long as roughly it has the same amount of wool. So now you can help things along by maybe rolling it up a little bit and then stuffing it into this little hole right here. Now I just want a little bit poking out. It's not necessary, but it's always nice to have some poking out, so that way when you're needle felting, you have some excess wool that you can help to attach it onto the base. Let me just go ahead and start needle felting here. So you don't want to pack it too densely. If you pack it too densely, you may have a tendency to make this. Now, I wanted it to be a circle, but if it's too tightly packed, then it might create like an oblong shape. So I'm just giving it a few pokes, and then I just go on the opposite side, poke again. I don't want to poke too much, because otherwise if I do, then it will become too hard to manipulate and correct afterwards. So you just want a few pokes just so that it's somewhat dense. So you see it's not very pretty, but it has the rough shape of a circle. You can make it prettier once you take it out of its little funnel, and then you just go ahead and start cleaning it up a little bit by poking that at the edges. So it's not, I mean, there's still a lot of squish to it because it's not packly dense, but you can fix that a little bit later once it's attached to the head. So you see there, it's a little bit better. Still not as pretty, but we'll fix that once it's attached to the head, and it'll help if I'm in frame. There we go. Okay. So here I have some excess that I can use to attach onto the head. So I took the excess wool and I flared it out. So that way it creates something, so that way it can attach to the head. So let me just see what would be a good angle. This seems to be a good angle. Okay. And that seems to be okay. These ears might be a little bit big, but I could still fix that because it's not packed too tightly just yet. So I could still manipulate it even further. Or if I need to, I could trim this in half and make it half the size, so that way it's about this big. So before we attach it, let's go ahead and needle felt the other one, so that way we have two to compare. So it's in there, and we go ahead and we poke a few times. And I'm not just poking in one spot, I'm poking all around, so that way it is evenly dense. And that should pull it out. Again, it's not pretty, so clean it up. And I think this one actually turned out a little bit better than the other. But here you go. So they look to be roughly the same size. And if you want to just have a basic idea as to what it may look, what I recommend doing is just attaching it and maybe getting one of those needle holder things. I don't know what they're called, but this tack thing that I have right now used for sewing. So you put that on to one side, take the other, because sometimes what I've noticed with new needle felting crafters, they just go ahead and just start attaching the ears or whatever right away without any kind of planning as to where you're going to attach. So you might have like these ears that like one side is like way off to the side while the other one's like kind of pointing straight up, so it looks kind of weird. So this way you have a rough estimation as to where the ears will end up. And at this point, I think I may want to trim that one up a little bit. Well, we'll see. Actually, let's just go for it. Let's just needle felt it and see where we end up. So I'm just needle felting it in place so that way the ears are attached to the body, or the head, I should say. It doesn't look very nice at this point, but needle felting can be very forgiving if you know how to manipulate the materials. With anything with practice and with a lot of practice, you get a tendency of knowing how certain materials, certain art and crafts react. So I'm kind of taking this off of the experience that I had when I was doing polymer clay. Before doing needle felting, I was a polymer clay artist, and I had done that for several years. Just like needle felting when I first started, they were ugly, really disgusting looking things. But I got used to how acrylic paint worked with certain glosses, what certain brands reacted to what. I got used to handling clay and how to sculpt, and it worked out for the best. Yeah, my polymer clay crafts became a lot better over time. If you're curious as to what my old polymer clay stuff used to look, I do have a few clay crafts up on my Etsy that are up for sale. But in terms of my older stuff that I made years ago, you can go ahead and visit my DeviantArt website. I'll link it into the description box below. So at this point, it's looking okay. Yeah, it's really hard needle felting this and angling my head around the camera. I mean, I could look through the camera, but the screen is, it's a cheap camera and the screen's pretty small, so it's kind of hard to see, so it's better just to look around the camera. Hence why sometimes I'm out of frame, because I'm trying to like angle it closer to my head, and I apologize for that. And it looks to be getting there pretty well. Okay, and it still looks pretty ugly, but you kind of get the idea. You could still fix it. So now you're gonna clean it up. So start tucking things in, poking it so that it gets interwoven inside. Some places may look lumpier than others, so what you do at that point is you can get a pair of small scissors, like scissors meant for sewing thread, and you can start snipping at those parts and then making the fibers loose and then re-needle felting it back in. So, yeah, that's looking pretty wonky here. Yeah, I don't like that, so I'm going to probably snip that. Let me just clean up this part right here. Now, there is a different method as to when you are needle felting with two different colors. So right now, I'm just needle felting the ears onto the head, and they're all the same color, but if I wanted to, let's say, needle felt on, like, let's say this was a panda bear, and the head was white, these were black, what I would do instead of kind of like flaring out the edges of the ear and then needle felting it onto the head, there's a different method to going about attaching it like that. I'll probably do that in another video, so that way I don't have to stop what I'm doing right now and show you. So, basic shape of the head right here. I still don't like how that looks. It looks really ugly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some scissors and I'm going to snip that. So that way it's a little bit loose. probably going to fix this side a little bit too because it's just not very smooth. So now I'm using my needle to kind of fluff things out. Don't do it too hard because if you do, you'll break your needle. But that just kind of makes things loose. You can also use your fingers as well. And now I want the ears to be a little bit more round, so I'm just lightly poking at the edges. And now I'm going to reattach. It would help if I'm in frame. I'm so sorry. I keep on doing that, but I want to make sure that this head looks nice. If you see I'm doing this at an angle right now, it's just that I want it to be more blended in. So rather than just going right in and just like shoving the wool fibers deep inside, I'm poking it at an angle so that way it creates a nice smooth surface. Okay, so after some more pokes, you can kind of see that I was working on this ear, fixing it up, and it does look a little bit better than the other side. So you just do the same thing on the other side, just trying to fix it up. If you don't like how something looks, like how these fibers, they look way too clumpy, so you would just get a pair of scissors, snip those parts so that it's loose. Use your needle to kind of comb it so that way the fibers are a little bit more loose, and just go ahead, keep on poking it so that way it has a nice smooth consistency. So that's just a comparison. And that's how you attach ears using stencils. So for my next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue using this head, and I'm going to show you how to sew on a mouth. So I'm going to put a white muzzle right here, and I will show you how to use a sewing needle and thread and sewing on the mouth, which is going to be the number 3 shape mouth. So look forward to that next video. Bye!